In the 1960s, Michael Jackson's father Joseph wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So one night when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through his window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. According to a survey, more than half of all commercial pilots have fallen asleep during a flight. 29% of these pilots claim they've woken up before and seen the co-pilot asleep as well. In 2010, a Polish man wanted doctors to remove a years-long cyst on the back of his head. Upon further examination, doctors found that the cyst was actually a .22 caliber bullet lodged in his scalp. He hadn't noticed it because he was drunk at the party where he was likely shot 5 years earlier. When North Korea was battling food shortages last year, Kim Jong-un ordered his citizens to give up their dogs. Authorities went door to door, forcefully confiscating all canines, which were then sold to meat markets to be eaten. This is the world's heaviest woman in 1922 as compared to the world's heaviest person today. A Japanese ice rink once put 5,000 dead fish in their ice so that their customers could skate over a frozen ocean. The attraction was closed immediately after public outrage. An Iranian woman underwent 50 surgeries and dropped to 90 pounds in a catastrophic attempt to look like Angelina Jolie. While filming The Wizard of Oz, 16-year-old Judy Garland was put on quite the extreme diet. It consisted of chicken soup, coffee, and roughly 80 cigarettes per day. Despite growing up deaf and blind, Helen Keller was a supporter of eugenics. She believed that infants who were born with severe mental or physical disabilities were better off dying. Tobacco companies spend the most money on advertising during the month of January. This is because January is when most people are trying to quit as New Year's resolutions. This is a photo of an Iraqi officer with a fearless expression on his face just moments before being beheaded by an ISIS militant. Male otters have been known to violently rape female otters, baby seals, and other sea creatures. Sadly, this often results in death for the victims since the male otter will sometimes bite and drown them to get his way. In 2003, a woman from Texas hit a homeless man with her car and his body became lodged in her windshield. She drove home with him still stuck in the car and repeatedly apologized to the man when he was in her garage. But she never called for help and the man died 2 days later as the woman received 50 years in prison. Dodo birds were very friendly and curious animals since they had no natural predators. And then we came along and killed them all. For animal testing involving dogs, most laboratories use beagles because they're the most forgiving of humans inflicting pain on them. In the 1920s, the federal government poisoned alcohol in an effort to curb consumption during Prohibition. As a result, more than 10,000 Americans died from poisoning by their own government. Just 2 years after filming Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick killed 2 women while driving on the wrong side of the road in Ireland. He said he had no recollection of the incident and got off with a $175 fine. A male gorilla named Michael learned sign language and once used it to describe his mother being shot and killed by poachers. 2 years ago, a distress message was found in a can of sardines saying, "We are Sudanese laborers enslaved by this company." An investigation was opened by Egyptian authorities, but nothing ever came of it. Genghis Khan would marry off one of his daughters to the king of an allied nation and then assign his new son-in-law to military duty. As Khan expected, most of these son-in-laws would die in combat, giving his daughters complete control over these nations. This is why saturation diving is one of the highest paying jobs in the world. In 1983, 4 rig workers were working deep in a diving chamber in the North Sea. When one of the men opened a hatch too early, the chamber quickly depressurized and dropped from 9 atmospheres of pressure to 1 in less than a second. All 4 men were killed instantly as the pressure was so explosive that it caused 3 of the divers' blood to flash boil. The 4th diver wasn't any luckier as he was forced through a small opening and violently torn apart. According to the autopsy, all of the organs of his chest were launched out of his body and projected upwards more than 30 feet. All of the men likely died immediately, but the investigators were never the same after discovering such a gruesome scene. The singer of Peanut Butter Jelly Time died after an 11-hour standoff with police in 2002. During the ordeal, his brother-in-law Snoop Dogg attempted to calm him down and convince him to surrender. Your intestines know how to get back in the right place. When performing abdominal surgery and the intestines need to be moved, the doctor will simply stuff them back in. There's a condition called Ondine's curse which causes sufferers to die if they fall asleep. The only treatment is for patients to wear a ventilator every time they sleep. In 2001, a man donated his kidney to his wife who was suffering from renal failure. 8 years later, when his wife filed for divorce, he demanded her to return the kidney or pay over $1 million. Kim Jong-un travels with his own toilet to prevent his excretions from falling into the wrong hands. The waste contains important information about his health status and can't be left behind. In the 1960s, the CIA spent $20 million on a cat equipped with gear to spy on the Soviets. Sadly, the operation was canceled when the cat was hit and killed by a taxi almost immediately. A 115-year-old woman from Nepal has been smoking at least 1 pack of cigarettes per day since 1920. She claims that smoking has aided in her longevity and that all the doctors who advised her to quit have already died. Lama Itigilov was a Buddhist said to have reached nirvana, the final goal of Buddhism. This is due to the lifelike state of his corpse, which is not subject to macroscopic decay even though he was never embalmed. He died in 1927, and upon the latest examination in 2005, scientists stated his body was in the condition of someone who had died just 36 hours ago. In 2009, an Indian doctor removed 172,000 kidney stones from a single kidney. Both the patient and surgeon now hold Guinness World Records that will hopefully never be broken. In 1961, Soviet doctor Leonid Rogozov was working in Antarctica when he realized he had appendicitis. He knew he would die if his appendix wasn't removed, but he was the only doctor on the expedition. So he ended up performing the surgery on himself and miraculously recovered. While Keanu Reeves was filming The Matrix, his daughter was stillborn at 8 months. The tragedy caused he and his girlfriend to break up shortly before she was killed in a car crash. Since then, he has donated most of his earnings from movies and has avoided serious relationships and having kids. In the 1500s, Mapuche warrior Galvarino had both his hands cut off as punishment for defying the Spanish. He returned home, raised an army, and fought the Spanish with blades tied to the stubs of his hands. In 2006, the Miami Hurricanes football team gathered in prayer for their teammate Brian Pata, who had been shot and killed. 15 years later, his teammate Rashawn Jones has been charged with his murder. This is why you should never smash someone's face into a birthday cake without knowing what's inside of it. A Florida lifeguard was fired for saving someone who was drowning because he went outside of his designated area. The executioner from the infamous Vietnam War photo opened a pizza joint in Virginia after the war. When elephants lose a mate, they sometimes refuse to eat and will lie down and shed tears until they starve to death. They're the only animals known to die as a result of heartbreak. A former FBI agent has claimed that Tupac's boss Suge Knight financed the murder of Biggie in 1997. The intended target was actually Biggie's boss Sean P. Diddy Combs, who was in the car in front of Biggie at the time. In 2015, Airbnb held a contest where the winner got to spend the night in the Paris catacombs, which hold the remains of 6 million people. In 1915, the U.S. Postal Service banned the mailing of people after a 4-year-old girl was sent across the state of Idaho by her parents. A man whose headaches were so painful they made him vomit has finally found the source of his problem. A tapeworm has been lodged in his brain for 10 years after eating undercooked pork in Mexico. Martin Luther King Jr. was tragically assassinated when he was just 39 years old. However, an autopsy revealed that he had the heart of a 60-year-old, likely due to stress. This is a photo of 2 elephants embracing one last time before being separated for a lifetime of serving man. A deaf man was stabbed and killed in North Carolina just for communicating. He was simply signing to his friend when a local gang member mistook the conversation for gang signs. BBC regularly rehearses the Queen's death to ensure that their cover of it is flawless when she actually does die. 4 people were killed during a Rolling Stones concert in 1969, but the overall population of the concert didn't change. This was because 4 babies were born during the concert as well. This is a World War II photo of a Japanese boy waiting for his turn to cremate his dead baby brother in Nagasaki. Photographer Joe O'Donnell said the boy was biting his lips so hard to avoid crying that it was bleeding. If your lungs were completely opened up and laid flat, they would cover the entire size of a tennis court. When the mummy of Ramses II was transported in 1974, it was issued an Egyptian passport that listed his occupation as deceased king. This 1955 device allowed the user to smoke an entire pack of cigarettes at once. Alzheimer's disease doesn't affect emotional memory as strongly as informational memory. As a result, Alzheimer's patients who are told bad news will often forget the news but will remain sad and have no idea why. The owner of Ray's Sausages spent nearly $30,000 to combat the foul smell said to be coming from his shop. It was later discovered that the odors were actually coming from the rotting victims of his neighbor, serial killer Anthony Sowell. Replacement teeth were once made from the teeth of dead soldiers after they were scavenged from the battlefield. This is the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald sitting at the bottom of Lake Superior. The 700-foot freighter sank in 1975, taking the lives of all 29 men on board. The bodies were never recovered and are said to be well preserved even today due to the cold waters. Since 1946, the Russians believed they had a piece of Hitler's skull, serving as evidence that he died. But in the year 2000, it was discovered that the skull fragment had actually belonged to a middle-aged woman. In 2001, the FBI warned Russell Crowe that Al-Qaeda was planning to kidnap him as part of a cultural destabilization plot. For 2 years, the FBI publicly guarded Crowe and refused to give him any details on the threat. Medical mistakes kill over 250,000 Americans each year. If they were a disease, they'd be the third leading cause of death in the U.S. behind cancer and heart disease. Jim Creighton was the first baseball superstar according to historians. In 1862, he swung so hard into a home run that he ruptured his bladder and died. Titanic designer Thomas Andrews was on board the ship when it sank. His original design included more safety features such as watertight compartments and twice as many lifeboats. But his ideas were rejected since they'd make the boat appear less attractive. He spent his last moments trying to evacuate passengers and his body was never recovered. The Grinch as a kid was played by an 18-year-old actor with dwarfism. Sadly, he died of heart failure just 2 years after the movie release. This photo was taken by a paramedic in 2015 outside of a hospital in California. It shows an ER doctor who stepped outside to cry for a moment after losing a 19-year-old patient. Minutes later, he walked back in the building with his head held high and continued on to his next patient. In the 1940s, Mike the Chicken lived for 18 months after his head was axed off. He only died after choking on a kernel of corn. In 2010, Mexican singer Sergio Vega publicly denied a news report that he had been murdered. Hours later, he was murdered. A Massachusetts man named Kenny Waters was wrongly imprisoned for 18 years for murder. He was finally freed in 2001 after his high school dropout sister went to law school to prove his innocence. Just 6 months after he was released, he died in a freak accident. The well-endowed man behind this legendary image is none other than Wardy Joubert III. He was a football coach and preacher who sadly died in 2016 from a heart attack at the age of 45. When a photojournalist took this picture of a little girl in Syria, she raised her arms in surrender because she thought the camera was a gun. In 2011, a Pakistani woman was sentenced to life in prison for killing and cooking her husband because he wanted a physical relationship with their daughter. Ignaz Semmelweis was the doctor who discovered that washing your hands prevents the spread of many diseases. But since this went against the popular medical opinion of his time, he was committed to a mental asylum where he was beaten so badly that he died of gangrene from the wounds. Mike Tyson got into his first fight after a bully ripped the head off of one of his pigeons. He said that the pigeon was the first thing that he ever loved and inspired him to become a fighter. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual pandas. When people die from Alzheimer's, it's usually because the disease got so bad that they forgot how to swallow or breathe. There's a blue whale who sings at such a high frequency that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard every year since the 1980s but never receive a response. He's been called the world's loneliest whale. In 2011, a 17-year-old Chinese boy sold his kidney on the black market so that he could buy the new iPhone and iPad. 8 years later, the man's other kidney failed and now he's bedridden for life. The men in white are the surviving members of the original San Francisco Gay Men's Choir. The rest represent those who were lost to AIDS. American Airlines assured a blind woman that they would help her off the plane after the other passengers had gotten off. They then proceeded to forget about her and locked the plane while she was still inside. In 2013, a Clemson student ran an experiment to help turtles safely cross roads. So he placed a fake turtle in the road to observe driver behavior and accidentally discovered something disturbing. He found that 6% of people deliberately went out of their way to hit the turtle. When she was 16 years old, Annalise Michaels started eating her own hands and drinking her own urine while suffering from seizures and delusions. but her devout Christian family denied medical reasoning and instead blamed the devil. She underwent 67 exorcisms and weighed less than 70 pounds at the time of her negligent death. If you're close enough to a nuclear blast, you'll die with no pain because the explosion will kill you faster than your brain can detect pain. This eerie 1986 Twin Towers advertisement speaks for itself. In 1989, a Los Angeles woman received a phone call from her brother-in-law saying that her ex-husband was on his way to kill her. She dialed 911 but was told nothing could be done unless he showed up at her house. Within 15 minutes, he arrived, killing her and 4 other women who were celebrating her 27th birthday. Arnold Schwarzenegger has said in many interviews that O.J. Simpson was originally casted to play the Terminator. The main reason he wasn't is that James Cameron didn't think O.J. would be believable as a killer. This is a rare photograph of Ted Bundy having fun with kids in his neighborhood. It serves as a stark reminder of how easily a monstrous person can blend in with society. You can bite off your own finger as easily as you can bite off a carrot, but your brain prevents it. In 2002, a Chechen terrorist attack in a Moscow theater left 130 people dead, but only one of them was killed by terrorists. The other 129 were killed by Russian special forces trying to rescue them. In 2012, a British man went into a coma after getting in a bad car accident. When he woke up, he could speak fluent French and genuinely believed that he was Matthew McConaughey. Veterinarians take their own lives at 3 times the rate of the average person. This is partly due to online trolling and threats from pet owners who blame them for the death of a pet. Another reason is that vets can often tell when animals have been abused by their owners, but there's very little that they can do about it. Due to the skin's elasticity, it takes 3 full rotations to remove the human head. In 1847, a doctor performed an amputation so fast that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers as well. Both the patient and assistant eventually died from sepsis, while a spectator apparently died from shock. This resulted in the only known procedure with a 300% mortality rate. Through her grandmother Mary, Queen Elizabeth is a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. This technically makes Prince Charles the heir to Dracula's bloodline. The urine of a diabetic contains so much sugar that it can be purified and made into a high-end single malt whiskey. Rabies is such a deadly disease that you're more likely to survive being shot in the head. Only 14 people in recorded medical history have ever survived rabies, and all of them suffered permanent brain damage. There are tiny bugs closely related to spiders living in the pores of your face, which crawl onto your face to mate while you're sleeping. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams to study the effects of climate change. They ended up accidentally killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. When a woman with breast implants is cremated, the implants will melt into a goo. It then drips to the bottom of the furnace and must be cleaned up once it is cooled. A South African politician used to love his Mercedes so much that his last wish was to be buried while sitting in it. A man was once so angry about losing a knife fight in CSGO that he spent 6 months tracking down his opponent and stabbed him in real life. If you had smallpox scars in the 18th century, you were more likely to get hired. The scars proved that you already had smallpox and couldn't pass it on to your employers. The symptoms of schizophrenia are shaped by culture. Americans with schizophrenia tend to be more paranoid and experience harsher voices and hallucinations. In India and Africa, schizophrenic people tend to hear voices that are more playful and positive. After being convicted for the murder of Deborah Reese in 1993, Liddell Lee maintained his innocence for 24 years. Before his execution in 2017, his last words were, "I am an innocent man." Just a few days ago, a different man's DNA was found on the murder weapon. Female ducks are raped so frequently that many species have developed a second decoy vagina through evolution. They can offer it to intruders that they don't want to be impregnated by. Only 1 out of every 1,000 sea turtles born actually make it to adulthood. Fatal familial insomnia is a rare incurable brain disease that progressively destroys your brain's ability to sleep. Eventually, you stop sleeping altogether, go completely insane, suffer from seizures, and die from cardiac arrest. In 2016, an Indonesian pop star died on stage after she was bitten by the king cobra she was dancing with. She kept performing for 45 minutes before succumbing to the snake's venom. A German shepherd named Tolero stayed next to the body of his owner for 23 days after he had died in a snowstorm. He prevented animals from attacking the body and tried to keep his owner warm by sleeping by his side. In 1937, a gas leak in the basement of a school in Texas caused a massive explosion that killed 300 children. It was the deadliest school disaster in U.S. history and was so tragic that even Adolf Hitler sent his condolences.